What if I told you that political intrigue isn't just about villains plotting in dark corners, but about friends, allies, and even heroes undermining each other over how they remember the past and how they plan for the future? One of the most complex genres to write is without a doubt political fantasy. It is difficult enough to craft believable politics in the real world, in the regular setting. But when you add in magic, non-human races, fantastical resources, or divine intervention, the challenges of political fantasy multiply astronomically. It's entirely possible to break politics down into clear, easy to understand steps and their intrigues. And when you apply these steps across your story, you can create political tension that will immerse your readers, no matter how tangled or high stakes the politics gets. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time World Building with your host, Marie Mullaney. Let's start with what politics actually is. When it comes to politics, many world builders focus on making up councils and kings and magical hierarchies, and this is fine, but great political intrigue isn't built on the structure. Instead, it's built on three key questions. How did we get where we are? Where do we plan to go? And how do we plan to get there? And each of these questions generates its own battleground, its own kinds of tension, and its own tools of manipulation and power. What do you think of this definition of politics? Do you think there's more or less involved in politics? Let me know in the comments below. And let's break down each of these questions and their intrigues, starting with the past. How did we get here? The past is never just the past. It's the battleground of memory and legitimacy. How we got here also shapes where we want to go, since you can look back at the past and say, we should go back to that. Or you can look back at the past and say, never again. But your opinion on the past and the future is very much dependent on what people believe the past to be. Essentially, control of the story of how we arrived in the present, and you control the foundations of power. For example, in A Song of Ice and Fire, the noble houses all claim legitimacy based on the past. The Baratheons hold the throne due to Robert's rebellion and through his connection to the Targaryen line. Daenerys claims the right through the Targaryen blood. The Starks claim to hold Winterfell because of their connection to Bran the Builder. Here, history and bloodlines is a weapon. It is the power of legitimate government. Now, you need to bear in mind that the past and its impact on the present can absolutely be manipulated. So let's take a quick look at exactly what tools you can use to manipulate the past. First up is basically personal attacks through slander, rumors, and scandals. This is successful because you delegitimize your opponents and thus make their narrative of the past less compelling. After all, if in the present they're a liar or they're proven to be false because of the rumors that you've spread, which have some kernel of truth in it, then clearly what they say about the past just simply isn't true. Also, by casting the past of your political opponents in the worst possible light, you undermine their right to power in the present and hence their authority by showing them to be unworthy of this. Consider in A Song of Ice and Fire how Tyrion, Marjorie, Cersei, and Loras are all targets of whisper campaigns. In my own work, in Hidden Blade of Sangwheel Chronicles, my main character, Louis, uses personal attacks to distract and discredit the Baron of Somfa to the point of riling up the people of Somfa against their own Baron. Attacking an opponent's past is a remarkably effective tool. Our next tool for controlling the past is a big one, and that's education and societal control, which shapes how the past is remembered. Unless people have personal memories of the past is something which has been taught to them, something they learned from a book or a story or a myth. That's what I discussed about mythology in my last video on the topic, which you can check out in the information card, where I spoke about how mythology reinforces cultural values and cultural narratives by telling the stories of the past. Basically, if you control the information that people have about the past through the education system or through simply how they learn, or even the stories they tell, you control what they know about the past, and hence you control the foundations of power. This is why in Sangwheel Chronicles on the continent of Kisanghi, the threesome order controls mage training and public schooling, controlling historical narratives and religious memory through their education system. When all priests are mages, does it surprise you that the church is the dominant political force on the continent? And speaking of churches, our last tool in the category of how did we get here is prophecy and ideology, as in framing the past as part of a larger destined narrative. Consider how Melisandre frames Stannis in A Song of Ice and Fire. She speaks of him as the prince that was promised, a legendary hero who turned away the darkness. She says that what happened in the past is happening again, and that the prince that was promised must now return, and has returned in the shape of Stannis. Stannis himself sees his own narrative through this lens, and that reshapes his legitimacy from a noble with a claim to the throne to a prophesied hero who does what he must, and hence can justify all actions. And lastly, let's talk about straight up declaring a new past. Consider the movie A Knight's Tale. Bit of a spoiler here, but it's an ancient movie, so if you haven't seen it yet, you're probably not gonna. Anyway, at the end of A Knight's Tale, the main character is in stocks for pretending to be a noble. And then along comes the Prince of England, and he declares that no, actually, the main character has noble blood, and has had noble blood all along because the prince says so. So the prince didn't change the law, but he changed the past to fit in with the law, assigning nobility retroactively to the main character. So he straight up just declared a new past. Okay, so that's some of the ways to manipulate the question of how we got here. Next, let's talk about the future question. Where do we want to go? The future is the battleground of vision, ideology, and imagined destiny. Here we ask questions like, what kind of world do we want our children to live in? What dreams do we fight for? Consider two competing visions from The Shadows of the Apt by Adrian Tchaikovsky. On the one hand, we have the Empire of the Wasps, who want to conquer the lowlands and bring their own efficiency of civilization to the lowland beetles and ants and so on. On the other hand, you have the vision of Stenwald and his allies, who want the lowland city-states to remain free. Even if that's less efficient than the Wasp Empire, they want to remain free city-states. These two visions cannot coexist. They are two competing and clashing visions of the future that the politicians sell to their people. And when these two visions collide, that does, in this case, lead to war because they are so diametrically opposite each other. Okay, so what tools of political intrigue play into the question of the future vision? First up is simply charisma and oratory. A vision of the future means nothing without followers, without other people who believe in that future. So one of the first things a politician must do is articulate their vision of the future. They need to sell their vision to their followers and potential followers. Think about how in A Song of Ice and Fire, Robb Stark is proclaimed as the King of the North. John Umber proclaimed his loyalty to Robb, but more importantly, he proclaimed and stated his vision of the future, a northern king who understands northern needs and fights for northern desires. And this results in Robb becoming the leader of the northern faction, and it solidifies his opposition to the Iron Throne. So your politicians must have a vision of the future, and they must communicate it in order to be effective. Our second tool is a redux. It's prophecy and ideology again. If you offer a future that people believe is fated, where they can feel connected to a larger truth, or one that has an ideology you can sell them on, you can use almost any means to get to that ideological or fated future. Let's return to Stannis. Melisandre's visions guide Stannis' campaigns, driving him towards ruin and glory in equal measure. Stannis believes he is the prince that was promised, and those around him support this vision, and that leads him down a very dark path. Side note, when people engage in high-cost activities to prove their commitment to a certain worldview, like, for example, swearing never to do the devil's tango or unaliving their child, this actually reinforces their followers' faith in the leader because it shows the leader's commitment to their ideals. It doesn't matter if their vision is true or good or anything. The display of commitment through high-cost actions, high cost to the person, creates incredible loyalty in the followers of that person. So, if you use ideology as a future manipulation, include high-cost actions on behalf of the leader, even if they lie about them. They say this thing is a sacrifice when it's not, and so on. And this is because if the politician is seen to sacrifice for the sake of their ideology or prophecy, it increases the chance of their followers going along with them all the way through the gates of hell. Okay, side note over. So those are the two big tools for manipulating the future. Now, before we come to the biggest question, the one that causes the most conflict, the one with the highest possibility for drama, allow me one moment to tell you about my writing and how you can support the channel. I have written 500,000 words in the epic fantasy series Sangwheel Chronicles, and it is now complete. I've received great reviews about the world building and the characters, so if you like the work of Sanderson, Martin, Jordan, and Tchaikovsky, I think you'll like Sangwheel Chronicles as well. And I'm getting swanky new covers, which should be done by the time that this video goes live, and you can see them in the art behind me. The new release also has super cool interior art like what is on screen now. So check all that out on the link below. Side note on the new covers and whatever, if you have bought an ebook, it will automatically update, or it should automatically update. If it doesn't, I will leave a link down below to where you can get a free updated copy of the ebook. Okay, and now let's return to the path of politics, or how do we get to the future? This is the battleground of strategy, compromise, and maneuvering, and even violence. And disagreements about how we get to the future vision doesn't even have to be between factions who have different future visions. Factions that have different future visions might even agree on the path they need to walk to reach their divergent visions. Both Stannis and the Wasp Empire eventually agreed, well, war is the only way forward. But within a faction, you can have intense disagreement on how to reach the future. And to show you what I mean, let's take a short detour into political philosophy. And don't worry, I promise this is both relevant and I'll keep it short. So Karl Marx wrote Das Kapital, and he believed that the workers would rise up in revolution. But he believed that the workers would have to be organized in their revolution, and that as an intermediate step on the way to the utopian paradise of the workers, the state could seize the means of production and then eventually pass ownership of the means of production back to the workers. So that's what Marx believed and what he stated. However, there was a philosopher called Kropotkin who did not agree with Marx. He said you cannot seize the means of production and give it to the state and expect a utopia to come from this. He said that this will merely result in replacing the capitalist class with state ownership, with the state being the ownership class. And he said that in order to reach the utopia, the communist utopian vision that they both believed in, you had to have praxis. You had to practice what you preach, which is to say, the workers had to seize the means of production from the start. There could be no point at which you have a state seizing ownership. So, both men wanted the same end goal, a communal society, but they fundamentally disagreed on how to get there. And that disagreement leads to political tension and intrigue. And indeed, it led to a split between the Marxists and the anarchists. And if you're interested in exploring my thoughts on how you can build an anarchist world, a world with an anarchist government, you can check out my video in the information card. Or if it's the class struggle that interests you and how you can apply that to fantasy, you can check that out in the other information card. Anyway, as we can see, when two factions disagree on methods, even if they agree on ideology, there is fertile ground for betrayal, sabotage, and bitter, bitter conflict. In short, you have the territory of high drama, even within a single movement, even in a good guy faction. You can build powerful political intrigue just by asking, what is each faction willing to do? What are they not willing to do? Who's compromising? Who thinks that compromise is a betrayal? Okay. Now we understand what the path is. Let's talk about the tools politicians can use while navigating this path of how to get there. The first tool, the biggest one, is war. There is no more violent political act than war. It is the ultimate disagreement, the moment when diplomacy, maneuvering, and schemes collapse and politics shifts from the arena of the courtier to the arena of blood. So yes, war is absolutely part of politics. And we see this most closely when competing visions of the future clash irreconcilably. In the shadows of the app, the wasps want the lowlands want to be free, and war results. But once the armies start marching, the intrigue often fades into the background. Armies collide, generals command, and spies scramble to get out of the way before they get killed. That's why in political fantasy, some of the most exciting intrigue comes from before the war breaks out or during the lulls, negotiations, and shifting alliances around the battlefield. So let's explore some of the other tools available to you, starting with a mostly fantasy-based tool, personal power. Now, I don't want to say that personal power is all fantasy. After all, billionaires are currently demonstrating that money is its own kind of magic when it comes to political manipulation. But personal power is the political tool where magic or other fantastical elements really come into their own. Consider again in A Song of Ice and Fire the impact of dragons and the Targaryens. Aegon didn't conquer the Seven Kingdoms because he had a more compelling vision of the future or because he was a cunning manipulator who could dominate through spies and information. No, Aegon beat the ever-living crap out of the kingdoms because he and his sisters all rode dragons and the other kingdoms didn't. Magic can upend all power and shatter conventional understanding of politics because it invests so much personal power in a given individual. And you can check out more of my thoughts on the topic over here in one of my earliest videos. Our third tool for the path to the future is resource control. Whoever controls the key resources shapes what future is even possible. In Malazan, access to warrens, magical realms, determines the ability to wage war or heal the wounded. In addition, the Malazan Empire keeps a very tight control over Otataro, which is a mineral that can counter magic. And this allows the Empire a massive advantage when it comes to the competition of reaching their future vision against other factions. One of the means to control a resource is, of course, through legal manipulation. And manipulation of the law is a great way to build political intrigue. Consider the Faith Militant from A Song of Ice and Fire. They are forbidden because they are a competing faction that can generate a great deal of populist power because they touch on what people believe. Okay? Now, Cersei undoes that forbiddenness of what they do and allows them to operate again because she thinks she can use the Faith Militant against her enemies. Of course, she completely loses control of that whole plotline and it goes to hell in a handbasket, but you know, what can you do? However, not everyone can change the law at a whim, so let's move on to our fifth tool of political intrigue, distraction and misdirection. After all, why confront your enemy head on when you can keep them busy with something else? Lightfingers is a master of this in A Song of Ice and Fire. He feeds distractions and he plays up rivalries to keep bigger players off balance and leave him space to operate. Think of how many plots he has spinning in the air and how many people believe he's their friend, from Sweet Robin and Lisa Rain to the Lannisters. And speaking of Littlefinger, our sixth tool is alliances and betrayals. Marriages, treaties, and secret pacts can be formed and broken overnight. Consider the Red Wedding in A Song of Ice and Fire. It is a wedding meant to secure an alliance, but instead it becomes the stage for mass murder and betrayal. In the shadows of the act, alliances between city-states and insect kingdom rise and fall based on fragile political calculations, and long histories of war between these cities have to be overcome. Stenwell does manage to make peace between enough of the ant cities to put together an army, and through doing so, he actually creates a stage for one of the ant commanders to take over that army, much to Stenwell's dismay. The key here is build-up. The higher you build the alliance, the harder the impact when the betrayal comes. And our last tool in the question of how we get to the future is skullduggery. This includes espionage, information control, assassination, and even uprisings or targeted strikes against certain opponents. Political violence isn't always about armies. Sometimes it's about targeted violence or small sparks meant to ignite bigger fires. In Malazan, assassinations and brutal skirmishes set the stage for large-scale battles. The Claw, the Malazan Assassins Guild, plays a deadly role in shaping who even gets to take the field in the battles. In the Seven Cities, for example, they infiltrate a grassroots movement in Aren and successfully wipe out that movement by killing the leaders. In Sangwheel Chronicles, I use assassination as a tool in the opening book, which is all about Louis being instructed to kill the Baron of Somfa. Also included in this category is spies and the flow of information. Knowledge is power is a saying for a reason. Consider the immense influence of Varese in A Song of Ice and Fire, especially through his little birds, which he uses to reshape the realm's balance, apparently to the benefit of the Targaryen faction. We don't know for sure what his faction is, or even consider the role that Fedre plays in Jacqueline Carey's Cashil's Dart, where she is both a courtesan and a spy. This tool of information flow is one of the most intriguing tools to use because it creates high-stakes situations that can set action scenes that your protagonist needs to navigate while they are being a spy or chasing spies. And that brings us to the end of the tools for the path of how we get to the future. Now, I do want to emphasize the best political fantasy stories mix these tools across all three arenas: the past, or how we got here, the future, or where we want to go, and the path to reaching that future, or how we get there. And not only do they use these tools from each arena, but they also have conflict in each arena. Consider Jon Snow's death in A Song of Ice and Fire. He shares the same vision with his brother, fighting back the darkness that threatens the wall. But he believes the path forward is to include the wildlings in that defense. For his brothers, this is not the path. Their hatred of the wildlings, stemming from the past where the wildlings are the enemy, is too great. And John doesn't sell them on the path he wants to follow nearly well enough. And so they engage in the ultimate political act to reach their own vision of the future. They unalive him. You want to blend past, future vision, and how we get there. And you want to blend your tools: oratory, violence, personal power, and manipulation. So don't stop at the clashing of armies or at the scheming nobles in a court. Build a world where power flows through a web of strategies, beliefs, betrayals, and personal ambition. So, with all that said, here is my best advice for how to achieve this in your story and in your world building. First, give your different factions in politics a fractured memory of the past. Don't let any one faction have a complete monopoly of the truth. 2. Give factions a slightly different ideal for the future. Let them battle over their future visions when they disagree with each other. 3. Force characters and factions to wrestle with methods. Even if they share a vision for the future, one of the most compelling battles is the battle for how we get to that future. And lastly, let heroes undermine heroes. Great intrigue lives inside the good side, not just between good and evil. The thief might be fine with stealing an artifact for the greater good. The paladin probably won't be. And the drama lies in the paladin finding out about the theft and fighting with the thief over the path forward. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment down below. And thank you very much to all of my members, especially the just-in-timers of the Build It in Stone level: Neil Buckley, Lupex Lakeshire, Necromancer JM, Epic, Katie Kofi Mug, and Tony Lamana. You guys make it possible for me to keep making these videos. If you'd like to support the channel, one free way to do that is just to watch another video, because that way the algorithm knows that it should love me. And if you enjoyed this video, maybe check out my video on writing better politics, which I'll put on the screen right now. And I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time World Building.